right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you had some good conversations, and that didn't seem too abrupt. We're going to move on to our next block of content. So the remainder of the day, we've got 2 more sessions. So we're going to have a short session here related to stakeholder engagement. And then I'm going to turn things over to my partner in crime, David Meyer, and he's going to facilitate a discussion related to just various hot topics, whatever is top of mind for all of you. And then we'll wrap up for the day. We've got a small but mighty group left. This is where if we were together in real life, we could just push the tables together and have a nice circle for this last round. So like this morning, I just encourage you to engage via the chat feature. So moving on to our next session, I think, from what we heard this morning from Pam and Teresa and Meredith, they all certainly really emphasize the importance of engaging with internal stakeholders and how they really can be an asset to any travel expense, meetings program. I think when we think about stakeholder engagement, certainly they've been incredibly valuable over the past 6 months, but there was a time before COVID. I refer to it as the before times, and there will at some point be a post-COVID world. It may look different, and so I've invited our panelists for our session today, Adam and Michelle and Robert, and I'll bring them up onto the virtual stage here in a minute. What I've asked each of them to do is to share with all of you an example of a success story they've had within their organization where they really have truly needed to engage with and get buy-in from various internal stakeholders. So after we do a few introductory remarks, I'm going to give each of them an opportunity to share their story and give all of you an opportunity to ask questions and pick their brains a little bit. And they've each got different examples, and I think that you'll really find value in all of those stories. So first up to the stage, we have Adam Smith, who's a senior manager for procurement at Zillow. So welcome, Adam. I'd also like to welcome Michelle Amos, who is the travel program manager for Smartsheet. And I got introduced to Michelle a few months ago, and she had the honor of starting as the travel manager for Smartsheet in March, so like right in the midst of a pandemic. So she's had a really interesting couple months. And then, I think most of you also know Robert Wade. And so Robert's the global travel manager for F5 Network. So I'm just really thrilled that the 3 of you agreed to share your time and your stories today. So David, we can go ahead and pull this slide out if we want. So I wanted to just kind of start off with a question, not just for the panelists, but for everyone in the audience, for those folks who are left with us for the afternoon, and just find out where everyone reports within their organization. So we'll just go in this order. I'll start with Adam, and then go to Robert, and then to Michelle, and for everyone in the audience, if you want to just submit your where you report within the chat, and we'll do sort of an informal poll. So Adam.
Yeah, so I report up through procurement and up through shared services and finance.
Great, thanks. And Robert?
Yeah, we're the same way, procurement and then ultimately finance. Great,
and Michelle?
Yeah, procurement, 3rd time's a charm.
So I'm noticing a bit of a trend. So, outside of where you currently report, who would you say your other most engaged stakeholders are at the moment, right? And certainly I know that changes, over time. Michelle, just over the past few months, who have you found yourself engaging with more often?
Primarily our meetings and events team, and a little bit of our executive admin team for the essential travel that our executives have done.
Great. Robert, how about you?
Click the wrong button.
All good.
So my big stakeholders lately have been comms and HR. So those seem to be the folks that I've spent the most time with recently.
Gotcha. And Adam, how about you?
Yeah, to pivot a little bit, since I'm kind of going to talk about CARD today, our real focus has been our employees and our stakeholders as we think about this, and we can talk about it as we get into it in a few minutes.
Yeah, well, great. Well, why don't we go ahead and start with you, Adam? So as you said, you have a great example related to corporate cards. So why don't you go ahead and just tell us your story, and folks in the audience, if you have comments or questions for Adam, feel free to send them in as he's talking, and we'll do some follow-up after we hear his story.
Yeah, so I guess in the time before, as you related to, Jen, before all this, Zillow had a culture, especially in some of our sales organizations, of being super employee centric. From a card guide, maybe too much employee centricity there, and really we didn't have a mandated program in a lot of cases. And as we did make this transition, we really, I guess, in kind of that March timeframe over the last couple of months. Took a time to really pause and use it as a framework to build the right foundation to move forward as travel turns back on. So in really what we did is we took this as an opportunity to really reintroduce the program specifically around card and payments, to reach out to our leaders at really the VP and lead level to reintroduce kind of the reason why that I think probably everybody on this call is super familiar with, of why use card, not only the data, but rebate, yada, yada. And really to a T, we've got great buy-in across the board. And we really kind of use that as a springboard to drive that message down to our travelers, looking back to maybe 2019 numbers, to understand who are our heavy travelers, who's actually spending. And we have all that data, but there was not really that mandate or drive forward. Now, when I say mandate, like, I will pause, we don't have a mandate. We are very employee centric, but we are using that to drive down. And really a leader to a T has said, yes, my organization will be using corporate card going forward. So it's been a huge success from where we started to where we got to. At this point in time, we're up 40% in card volume and getting cards in hand. Clearly spend isn't there, as no one's is. Clearly that fell off a cliff, I think, across the board for every company ever. But that doesn't negate when we turn back on, we have 40% uptake in card volume, and we're trending to about 106% at this point in time with card applications coming in and pre-engagement. So we're really doubling our overall T&E card volume and using this as, again, that platform to be able to build off of as we go forward. So, kind of taking a step back, recognizing like COVID's not great. This is bad for not just the industry, but everybody. But where are those silver linings, and using that time to kind of take a pause, re-examine where our program's at, and understanding where we'll go next.
Thanks, Adam. So, as you think about that process, and obviously, it's clear that you've had, great success and great results. But you mentioned a couple things I'd love for you to elaborate on. One is, you mentioned the importance of a corporate culture and how there was a little bit of a shift because Zillow is a very sort of employee-centric organization. So just wondering how that was received, as you went through that shift. And then sort of a follow-up question is, can you just talk a little more specifically about which individual departments or stakeholders really were involved in that process, and who maybe was the biggest maybe ally and advocate in pushing this out, as well as was there anyone that maybe needed a little more help to get them on board? Yeah,
a little extra love. And I think there's always that. So I'll kind of start with the first part of that question of, what changed. And I think across the board, we recognize as a company, as individuals, as shareholders that, with everything with the economy, we need to all lean in. And I think that message resonated really well. And I think, coming to Zillow from another company, there are a ton of perks, and not saying that employees are entitled to things or anything in a technology company, but there's snacks for days and yada yada yada, and that really all pivoted as we moved to basement in Ravenna. Now we have snacks in my home. It's just not covered by the company. But with that, I think everybody recognized that there is a unique opportunity to lean in across the board, and I think that's resonated really, really well and it's not just corporate card, it's everything from benefits to yada yada yada, and I think that's something that we've really seen at our company is people recognizing that this is a pivot and a change, and how can we lean in to make sure that we continue to drive value for the company, which is super successful. For the other piece of who's been helpful with this, finance across the board. Our VP of finance has leaned in a huge amount, as well as our shared service leader as well, to make sure that we're driving the right message to our leaders in really our sales organizations, those who traditionally were the road warriors traveling over and over and over, where, again, in this audience, we recognize everybody's got their own points and their own perks, and et cetera, et cetera. That pivot has really allowed us to drive that message. And so that lean in from VP of Finance and VP of Shared Services to have that connect at that level has been super successful.
That's great. So I'm going to admit I got distracted by snacks because I'm very food motivated. And so it made me think of a conversation Michelle and I had a few months ago. So I'm totally going to go off topic for just a second. And I want to do a poll with all of you as well as the audience. I want everyone to put in the chat what their favorite work from home snack has been over the past few months. Mine, I discovered that Kind bars, they now have frozen Kind bars that are like the plant-based ice cream, and they're absolutely delicious. And I have to remember that I'm only supposed to eat one at a time. So everyone just jump in with your favorite quarantine snack. Let's just have a little bit of fun. Adam, do you have a favorite snack, either Zillow provided or self-provided?
No, popsicles. You went with that, like having popsicles. Perfect. So, better than that.
Robert, do you have a favorite work from home snack?
So it's not nearly as healthy. It's chili cheese Fritos.
Those are delicious. And Michelle is the rare person who doesn't snack, so we'll talk about that another time. But as she said, it's all about butter. Yeah, butter makes everything better. So blueberries. Okay, Teresa, thank you for putting something healthy in there. The Nespresso, excellent, Beth. Thank you. Hey, it doesn't. Drinks can be snacks as well, so it's important to hydrate and caffeinate. So thank you for going on that little digression with me. Well, thanks, Adam. So we'll see if any other questions come in for you, and we'll sort of pop back over to that. But with that, I want to transition over to Michelle. So I think you've got a great example of working with your meeting and events team recently. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and first off, I do want to preface, I snack. I don't have a favorite, but if I'm going to say a favorite through quarantine, it's butter. It's all about Julia Child and butter, and her famous statement was, if you're afraid of cream, use butter. So I use butter. But anyways, so getting back to the question about partnering with the department. So before I came along, so I started at the end of March, as Jen mentioned, and the first day that we had banned travel and the first day we had closed our offices. So it's been very interesting onboarding through all of this and managing a non-existent travel program. But what we identified through doing a lot of contract audits, since I report through procurement, that's really important. It's something we do on a regular basis, is we had so many different contracts out there that were initiated by our meetings and incentive teams. So multiple vendors that do the same thing. We weren't leveraging our spend, so there was really no opportunity to negotiate and drive further cost savings. And the team also, they're not experts in travel. So they would negotiate a hotel contract and leave in terms, or not try to negotiate, amenities be included and things like that in the rates. So I came in and really just wanted to introduce myself as the helpful travel manager. I did not want them to think that I was taking over their responsibilities. I wanted to make sure that they felt I was really there to help, that they're still the decision maker and business owner. So through that, I set up a monthly call so we could just talk about all things travel. Of course, working at Smartsheet, they have a Smartsheet of all upcoming meetings. So I was able to look at that and identify, oh, this is scheduled for this city. I don't see you have a contract yet for hotel. Can I help negotiate that with you? And then by doing that and partnering, it really allowed them to go back as the business owner and highlight the savings that they have achieved, or the great rates that they were able to negotiate, or the benefits of signing this contract and how they can shift those extra funds that were budgeted to maybe more extravagant gifts for our customers, or whatever it may be, acquiring different speakers. So it's been a lot of that grassroots effort of helping people to now where they do reach out to me. They know to reach out to me for support, or they have a off-the-wall type of question and, can you help with this? Or do you have any ideas? So that's been really great. And we are also coming up on our largest user conference, which is pivoted to virtual, of course, like everything in the world. And so helping out that business owner with some of those contracts and managing, the block rooms for the production company and things like that. And she's just feeling really secure in a partnership with the travel team and not feeling that we're trying to take things away or make it our type of program and what we would like to see. So I think that's really been helpful.
Thanks, Michelle. So a couple questions as follow-up. So the first is related to this idea of really being a partner. And I think that's always, it's such an important word. And I think it's a word that many of us use a lot. But how have you been able to actually make something a partnership? Like, what do you find are some of the important qualities to making something a partnership, as opposed to just like, we're two departments who have to work together sometimes? Like, how are you able to measure that? How are you able to identify like what's making it a success versus what you might have to tweak and adjust now and then?
So in thinking about that, I don't think there's necessarily at least in my opinion, a data way of measuring that success. I think it would just really be measured on how they're reaching out to me. So we have a process, anything that, is a contract, it has to be submitted, but they'll reach out to me beforehand and go, oh, I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think? Or I've got this with a vendor. Can you double check before I submit? Is there anything else I should be negotiating before I even send it to you to negotiate? Really try to take a lot of the administrative work off of their plate at the moment, because I have bandwidth. And I do express that with a caveat, I can help you with this because I have some bandwidth. And I think that's just really built some confidence and making sure, if I ever have a question, instead of going back and forth in an email, I try to hop on a GChat call with them or IM them just to build that rapport and that personal relationship.
Great. And I want to, actually, I'm going to pull Adam and Robert into this in just a minute and talk about sort of how sort of relationships have had to be adjusted a bit as we have worked from home. And I'm thinking about you starting literally as like things shut down. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But what I wanted to ask as a follow-up related to working with your meetings folks is knowing that, again, they were dealing with, cancellations and look, you've been looking at contracts and what's been included, what hasn't been included. Have you pulled any other stakeholders into those conversations, whether it be people from your legal team to look at the language in contracts? Have you pulled in finance folks? Who else has maybe been involved in those conversations?
Depending on the contract terms, we have had to pull in legal here or there. We worked a lot with our finance business owners, I guess that's a good term for them, to look at, okay, we're being charged a cancellation fee, but the hotel is willing for us to pay that and then apply it to a credit. how would you like to move forward? What's going to be best for our budget? Is that okay? Or do we need to push back saying, we're just going to roll this forward? Those kind of things. And their view from a finance and quarterly payment perspective and all of that, I think has really been helpful as well, because they're also the ones helping these meetings and events folks manage their budgets. So it's a really great partnership there as well.
Great, thank you for that. So again, I want to kind of go back then to just this idea of partnerships and relationships. And I'm thinking back, and this is where Adam and Robert, I'd like to pull you in. So, you know, pre-COVID, were both of you working in an office? And so and were you working in the same office with some of those other internal stakeholders? So, you know, we think about in an office environment, one of the advantages, and this has been a part of conversations with this work from home transition over the past couple months, is we've lost that ability to just like pass someone in the hall or meet up in the break room or pop into someone's office, which are those things that really do help to build those relationships. And having that easy access. And even though we have really great technologies, you know, whether it's some sort of instant messaging tool or, again, being able to hop on a quick Teams call or in whatever particular technology you use, I think for many of us, it's been an adjustment. So have you found that has made those relationships, how has that impacted those relationships with some of those stakeholders? Adam, do you mind commenting first?
Yeah, I think it is unique in like right now. I think one of the things that we've talked about is, you know, it's a little bit, it's nice that everybody's remote in some cases. It was really different in the past where you had one person remote and the other people in a single office. And given that it's completely changed where everybody's on their own island in some cases, we have the opportunity now, like everybody's on the same level playing field where in things in communication, whether it be sending out pre-reads or really documenting, being super crisp in communication of where are we going, what are we talking about, and being very proactive in making sure that we're maximizing time, slowing down in conversation and making sure that everybody's aware of it. But I do think that there is, and this is a little bit of, you know, personal opinion, that there is something lost in that direct relationship that I think probably, again, everybody on this call is super passionate about it. That replacement of travel being face-to-face is something that I think we're all super passionate about. And that is something that I think is going to be a constant conversation about how do we rekindle that human connection through a screen. And so I think the things that we've done is have, you know, pre-reads and making sure we're very deliberate with when we do have conversations, what they are, and documenting those, which I think is good, but you do miss that face-to-face without a screen.
Yeah. Robert, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's ironic that right before we started home, we started this initiative within procurement and travel and expense to get up from our desks and go talk to our stakeholders, right? It's like, stop IMing everybody, right? You know, if it takes more than 3 IMs, say, hey, I'm on my way to your desk, right? So ironically, now we have to stop that. But so one of the ways that I've kind of tackled that is that I just have a sheet here on my desk that has the list of people that I work with on a normal basis, and then on the backside is the people that I kind of sort of work with every now and then, and I just reach out to them via IM on a somewhat rotating basis. How's it going? How are the kids? No, I don't want to talk about COVID. Know that I'm here for you if you need me.
Right. Just stay on their radar.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I love it. And I love that whole, like, if it's more than 3 IMs, get up and walk to their office. That's fantastic. It's simple, but it's fantastic. So
yeah, it's no longer an instant message at that point.
So, well, speaking of COVID, because I don't think we could avoid it altogether as part of this conversation, Robert, I think that you have what I know I'm really excited to hear more about, an example about how F5 is going to perhaps start tackling contact tracing. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so we identified early on that in our quest to get back to travel, and we reopened travel on July 1st for domestic intra-country travel. In our quest to do that, we knew that there were folks who their jobs were to go talk to people, and sometimes talk to people with, in small groups and those types of things. But we also wanted to make sure that we weren't putting people in harm's way, right? So part of that discussion around getting back to travel was how do we ensure that, right? And at first we came up with, we can't literally ask, we already have a pre-trip approval in process in place. Do we need to ask additional questions, right? And so what we decided was that rather than going down that path, what we would do is just ask folks, hey, anytime you're in a small group, and we're going to define small group as 10 people, but if you choose to define it personally as 3, 4, 5, or 2, awesome. We're just going to ask you to tell us who you were with. Were they an external contact, or were they an internal contact? So, and then that way we would have the ability to say, in case somebody said, I've unfortunately contracted COVID, we would be able to reach out and say, we have an instance, right? And you may have been, you should go get an exam, right? So then we started to try and think about how we would do that. Do ServiceNow as a vendor. We started to launch Cvent right as COVID started, so we didn't really get too much further down that path. But then Rachel and my group had this really great idea. Well, what if we just took a meeting request form and developed a tool for folks to just go in and say, here's all my attendees, fill out a list, and then hit enter, right? And that's exactly what we did. We went to Cvent and said, hey, we would like to create this. And they helped us come up with a form that sits out on our intranet page that employees can just go to and say, I traveled on these dates, and here were the people I met with. Just very simple. Then that goes into a database that we can then report on should we need to. We haven't needed to. The other nice thing that happened around that pre-planned was that it turned into almost a little approval device as well, because we had an instance of where somebody went in and said, oh, I'm going to meet with all of these people. And then we went back, we stopped and said, do you really need to do that? And they said, well, okay, no. So then in that case, the meeting didn't happen. So, and it was in this particular case, it was in China where they were traveling like crazy, but we were still able to say, okay, let's step back and do and not do that event. So, yeah, so that was kind of our use case and what we were needing to solve, and how that all started.
Great. So, I mean, I love just the idea of like using an existing tool for another purpose that really benefited not just your travelers, but the company. So I'm curious then from a stakeholder perspective, who were the other people in your company who had to sort of be a part of that process? I, of course, anytime we start talking about COVID and health related issues, start thinking about, privacy and this and that and the other thing. So I'm, imagining perhaps, did legal need to step in, or because, it did involve a technology that you're using, was IT involved? So can you talk about who?
Yeah, absolutely. So, whenever we start a project, of course, it's like, who's our audience, who needs to hear the message, and who controls it, right? So for us, it started as a compliance thing, where I was actually first approached by, hey, we're thinking we may want to do this. Does travel have any tools in place by any chance, right? And no. Right. So then as we were kind of talking through our return to the workplace workflow, where all of, different members from around the company were there, HR, compliance, policy, legal, facilities, so thankfully we kind of had all those people in one place already. We were able to kind of talk through that process at that point. So so thankfully kind of all those people were already in the room. But that would have been for this particular thing, the process that I would have followed is to get all those people together, right? Who controls the message? Who might want to have a say in the message, right? Because the last thing you want to do is send something out and say, oh, hey, everybody can start meetings again, and then have facilities go, what are you talking about? The meeting rooms are all closed, or whatever the case may be, right? So so that was the process for us.
So, I mean, first of all, like, how great is it that they obviously saw you as a valuable resource to be able to come to you first and say, hey, do you have the tool? So that clearly shows that you already have a seat at the table, and they see the value that you bring to the organization. As you were going through this, or maybe even just thinking of another travel-related example, was there anyone during that process who, even if they didn't maybe give you pushback, were there people who sort of questioned whether this was the right path to take? And if so, how were you able to then get their buy-in?
Yeah, so in this particular case, certainly our compliance and privacy folks had some big concerns, right? And in terms of getting their buy-in, in this case, it was a little easy because I was able to say, here's the data we plan on collecting, and here's how we plan on using it. None of it is considered private or I can't find the word, but none of it is considered something that would be susceptible to get out to the world. And so that's kind of how it worked at that point. To your point, because legal had already vetted the tool and how the tool is used and what data goes where and by whom, then it was pretty easy for me to take that standpoint. So again, it really does come down to being able to step back and go, here are all of the things we've already accomplished, and here are the ways that we can leverage all of the permissions in this particular case that are already in place. IT had already approved our tool and vetted the tool. Legal had vetted all of the data points. So in that case, it really was kind of saying to them, hey, all of the things that you would have asked me to do, we've already done.
Great. Well, I just want to again let the audience know if you have any final questions or comments that you'd like to share related to this topic. Feel free to go ahead and send them in as we start to wrap up in our last few minutes. I know that the title of this session was engagement, and we've primarily focused on internal stakeholders, but obviously with every single one of your examples, it's involved external stakeholders. So, Robert, for you, Sivan, Michelle, for you, obviously all of the different venues that your meetings folks were working with. Adam, obviously I'm assuming the card providers and all of that whole payment ecosystem. So just kind of to close out, I'd love if each of you might just be able to share one piece of advice or some words of wisdom related to how to best engage with those external stakeholders. Adam, can I start with you?
Yeah, so I guess from an external standpoint, it's actually interesting in timing. So we're actually going through a card RFP at this point in time. And so actually something similar to what Neil was talking about earlier this morning of like, the data of 2019 is going to be exponentially better than the data of 2020. So it was kind of unique timing with that. But I think as we move forward, we recognize we have the right partner to move forward with it. But it was one of those kind of unique times of going through an RFP kind of during a fairly uncertain time. But during that engagement, think about getting cards in hand. We've been able to partner with them and work to make sure that we've simplified the application process. We really refined what we're doing internally, thinking about expense tools, et cetera, to drive the right message and the right process to be able to get cards in hand in my situation.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Michelle, anything on your side related to your story and the external stakeholders?
I would just say curiosity. So I think first it's really important to work with the internal stakeholders so you understand what their needs really are. So being curious, asking a lot of questions, and then going to those vendors, being very, very clear of what your needs are and curious of how they can help you, if there's any creative things that they could possibly do. We were able to do some creative things with our unused tickets due to COVID, as well as some hotel cancellation penalties, and just driving home the word partnership. I think in every email, I close it with at least thank you for your partnership. We value your partnership. Depending on the relationship I have with the vendors, there might be more smiley faces in my emails. But just really reaffirming that's what this is. It's not just a vendor, because if you're just a vendor, chances are I'm not going to do business with you anymore. So if you're that partner, we're going to have a long-standing relationship.
Yeah, I like that. And I know a lot of conversations I've had with folks over the past few months, it's not just the word partnership, but especially on the meetings and events side, like this concept of shared risk, really, and realizing that there's got to be some give and take within reason. And so I think that's really useful. So Robert, I'll end with you. So knowing the folks at Cvent that I know, they were probably thrilled to hear about a creative idea like this. So just any final words about their involvement in your example?
Yeah, no, Cvent has been really awesome through this. I think we were together most excited about the fact that we had this tool that we hadn't implemented yet, and here was an opportunity to get something implemented and in people's hands, right? Yeah. So yeah, Cvent was very instrumental in that conversation, and I mean, exactly to your point, you know, what is the partnership, and what's the value of that partnership? Has kind of been the most important thing to think about. I often say build the type of relationships to where they're going to take your call on Christmas Eve. And I kind of, especially now as we're thinking about, I have to make a hard call. What's my approach to that call going to be?
Sure, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all so much, Adam, Michelle, Robert. Really appreciate you giving your time today. So once again, a round of applause for the three of you. So folks want to give some virtual applause in the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and say our goodbyes and pull you off the stage. And I'm going to turn things over to Mike Meyer, who's going to facilitate us through a hot topics in travel and meetings management discussion. So David, I'm going to